You ever get that feeling like you're a pawn in someone else's game? Well, there's this hidden world of psychological influence happening all around us. It's kind of like this black magic of the mind, where you can't see the puppet masters, but you can feel them pulling the strings. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain. Seriously, think about it for a second. That time you made a decision that just felt off. Not quite yours. Or maybe you felt this weird sense of guilt or obligation to someone, but you couldn't for the life of you figure out why. If any of that sounds familiar, well, you've probably had a run-in with the very tactics we're about to break down. Okay, so let's just dive right in. And the best way to start is to get a really clear definition. Because look, to protect yourself, you've got to know exactly what you're up against. So what is this invisible art of influence anyway? At its heart, dark psychology is really the study of how to use human influence for one reason: exploitation. This isn't about helping people, nope. It's about taking a deep understanding of the human mind and using it like a weapon, all to benefit the manipulator. And usually, it comes at a huge cost to their target. And this is a really important distinction. I mean, we're all persuaded every single day, right? Positive persuasion is a win-win. Think about a friend encouraging you to hit the gym. But dark persuasion, that's purely a win-lose situation. The manipulator wins, and the target gets pushed into acting directly against their own best interests. It all, and I mean all, comes down to intent. So, how do these manipulators even get started? It's not like they just jump straight to mind control. There's an entry point, right? A kind of on-ramp to a person's psyche. And that on-ramp is always, always through our emotions. Wow. This quote from our source material is pretty chilling, but man, does it hit the nail on the head. For a dark psychologist, emotions aren't just feelings. They are the literal keys that unlock everything else: a person's beliefs, their actions, even their willpower. And they usually establish this control through a really clear three-step process. First up, love bombing. They shower the target with affection and praise to get their guard down. It's so effective because it taps right into our basic human need to be liked. But then it switches to positive reinforcement. Now that affection is conditional. You only get it when you do what they want. And finally, the most powerful step: intermittent positive reinforcement. The reward becomes unpredictable. This literally turns their approval into an addictive slot machine, creating this desperate craving that makes the victim so much easier to control. So once that emotional control is locked in, the whole game gets way more dangerous. The next phase is all about twisting the victim's perception of reality itself, making them actually question their own mind. So let's take a look inside the manipulator's playbook to see how they pull that off. Yeah, this playbook is just filled with these nasty tactics. It can be anything from subtle mind games and deception to more advanced stuff like undetected mind control, and in the really extreme cases, we're talking full-blown brainwashing. One of the most insidious tactics has to be something called reality denial. This is not a sudden attack, it's a slow burn. It's this gradual process of chipping away at a person's confidence in their own memory, their own judgment. The manipulator will actually engineer situations to make you question what you saw, what you heard, until eventually you start relying on their version of reality instead of your own. And this whole process is perfectly laid out in a classic tactic called the long con. The key here is patience. First, the manipulator builds trust. Then they test the waters with these small, seemingly helpful requests to get you used to saying yes. Once that pattern is set, bam, they make their real exploitative request. By the time they get to that final stage, the victim is so conditioned to trust them that they just comply, often without even realizing they've been totally played. Okay, so we've looked at the how, the tactics, the techniques. But what about the who? I mean, what kind of person actually uses these dark tools? Well, the source material points to a very specific psychological profile. Psychology has a name for this profile, and it's built on a foundation of, you guessed it, 3 very specific, very destructive personality traits. Together, they form what's known as the dark triad. So first, you've got narcissism. That's defined by a massive ego and this desperate, bottomless need for admiration. Then you have Machiavellianism. That's the strategic, cold-blooded focus on self-interest and exploitation. And finally, psychopathy, which is all about that superficial charm hiding a total lack of empathy or remorse. Now, when you get these 3 traits combined in one person, you've got a potential master of dark psychology. All right, I know this has all been pretty heavy. I get it. But the whole point of understanding these dark tactics isn't to make you paranoid. It's to make you prepared. Because knowledge is the ultimate defense against manipulation. Just by going through this with me, you've already taken the most important step you can. The curtain on this hidden world, it's been lifted. You can now start to see the mechanics that were totally invisible before. And that right there is the single biggest takeaway. Your awareness is your shield. Being able to spot love bombing or reality denial or the traits of the dark triad in action, that is the most powerful way to disarm them. Because you can't be a puppet if you can see the strings. So, I'll just leave you with this final thought. As you go about your life, at your job, in your relationships, even in the media you watch, ask yourself this one question. Now that you can see the strings, who's pulling them?